Greetings, adventurers. This is Lorne, your guild advisor, and welcome back to this week's installment of Cuts and Changes for DanMachi 4, where I highlight the differences between the original light novel source and the anime adaptation, as well as provide additional context for what you see in the show. With episode 5, we are treated to a great adaptation of the climax of volume 12, with the main Hestia expedition crew being aided by Haruhime's level boost distributed via her new Kokonoi magic, as well as Belle making his grand entrance to bring a finish to their struggle against the Moss Huge. Without further ado, let's start the breakdown. The episode begins with a flashback to when Aisha gives Haruhime the Grimoire in order for her to learn new magic. This is actually an extension of the scene from episode 1, incorporating some of the skipped dialogue as well as injecting some original bits. However, there is still no mention of Aisha essentially sneaking the book out of Hermes' Familia, but dropping that piece of info would be out of place for the far more serious tone of the situation, with the party fighting for their lives. The presentation for Kokonoi is done very well with how the tales grow and how the camera spins around Haruhime. The chanting also sounds great, with the reverberation in Haruhime's voice enhancing the mood of the scene. While the overall presentation for Kokonoi is great, I do want to include one quote from the light novel to showcase the emotions within Haruhime as she is chanting. And so she would sing, until her voice dried up, until her life drained away, breathing a prayer for her beloved companions. She would fulfill their spirited hopes, and she would help the boy whom she yearned for. The anime obviously can't include everything word for word, but I thought this would be a nice selection to highlight. The flashback between Hestia, Lily, Haruhime, and Aisha is anime original, and honestly a good way to incorporate more of Hestia into the anime, as she has minimal screen time due to the party being in the dungeon. Her inclusion here doesn't feel unnecessary, but more as a way to present a more serious Hestia, while also explaining how Kokonoi functions. Kokonoi allows Haruhime to store magic like her level boost into her tails, so she only needs to chant the spell one time to distribute it to multiple people, depending on the number of tails. Hestia mentions that Haruhime can currently only summon 5 tails, but her new magic has a potential maximum of 9, which is a reference to the Kyuubi, the 9-tailed fox. One neat detail the anime adds to showcase the difference in power the party got from level boost is showing Welf using his magic sword to fight off the monsters before he received it, and then switch to his regular sword after being boosted to a level 3 status. In the light novel, when Luvis, Dormal, and the other wounded are confused on what just transpired, Lily actually explicitly mentions that essentially, everyone leveled up. In the anime, she plays it a bit more cool, simply stating to keep what they saw a secret, which is probably the smarter decision. Even though they promise to keep quiet, Lily is better off not being specific on Haruhime's magic. Aisha makes note that they may be able to break through if they can keep up the pace after their level boost. This is because the number of monsters on a given floor has a limit. Since so many monsters appeared at the same time due to the monster party, there would be a time lapse before the dungeon could spawn more into the floor, giving the party an opportunity to make a run for it, but only if they could deal with the Moss Huge. Unfortunately for them, they fell into the monster's expectations, giving Aisha a mocking smile as it fed on the magic stones the party was leaving behind in their struggle. The monster evolves from the consumption of magic stones, and I love how grotesque and unnerving it becomes. Just like in the light novel, you can see that the moss began to shape like dragon scales. As Aisha fights against the newly evolved Moss Huge, she gets caught off guard by its extendable mouth, and even when boosted to level 5, she can't react in time to dodge the monster clamping onto her shoulder. If you want a detailed description, the novel says her flesh tore, her bones shattered, and blood spurted into the air. She's not having a good day. Aisha is actually quite incredible to withstand that and still keep the Moss Huge occupied while dealing with injury and the parasitic vines. This is also considering that the monster specifically targeted her, knowing that if she fell, the rest of the party would be in shambles with their strongest adventurer down. Kudos to Aisha for taking it like a champ. Welp's Krotso Fire Magic Sword was able to completely destroy the surrounding monsters around the Ma's Huge, but the party is surprised when the evolved monster seemed to take minimal damage when Bel's Firebolt from episode 3 was effective. It's revealed that it was wearing Undyne cloth taken from adventurers. Taking gear from dead adventurers is actually a sort of taboo in the series. It's seen as incredibly disrespectful to the familias of the deceased. Previously, it was mentioned that the Undyne cloth was mainly used to protect adventurers in water-based environments. However, keep in mind that Undyne gear contains the properties of a water spirit. Naturally, it's a counter to fire. In addition, the Krotso family carries the blood of a spirit, essentially making Welp's magic sword a spirit magic sword of fire, which ironically allowed the Undyne cloth to resist a lot of the damage. Cassandra is also displayed healing the party, but as shown through Mikoto getting hit, the party is becoming increasingly overwhelmed. Lily begins to start crumbling as the leader and retreated to another anime original flashback, this time between Lily and Hestia, where we continue to see Hestia with a more serious attitude. Dormal and Lubis offer to help and act as fodder, so the party can escape, and there's a part of Lily that desperately wants to take that option. Daphne once compared Lily to Finn, the Braver, and this is the type of logical decision that he would make. But Lily chooses not to idolize the fellow member of her prom race, but rather Bel, the boy who saved her in spite of the danger, in spite of the fact that Lily tricked them in the past. Bel didn't leave Lily behind, and so Lily, wanting to be more like her idol, wasn't willing to leave anyone behind either. Just as Lily gains the resolve to fight back, the hero of the story once again makes his move. Bel calls out to Lily with his arm extended, communicating that he's charging Argonaut, and Lily immediately understands his intentions. On his way back, Bel noticed something was off about the dungeon, and he began charging his Argonaut skill, anticipating a battle, this time a maximum charge of 4 minutes. His Argonaut-charged Firebolt incinerates all the monsters in the passageway, except the Ma's Huge, who is blown back through a wall, revealing where the final showdown between monster and adventurer will take place. Lily throws Bel a high dual potion, a special potion invented by Miyake and Naza, which restores both Bel's physical and mental strength, since he was drained from his fully charged Argonaut Firebolt. Again, it's hard for the anime to communicate the monster's point of view like the light novel, but the Ma's Huge's stare at Bel is supposed to be one of intense anger, because Bel surviving was not within the monster's foresight. The novel also includes some of Bel's thoughts as well. Standing across from the monster, Bel felt rage over the adventurers that the Ma's Huge harmed and killed. Even so, Bel understood that from a monster's point of view, the adventurers were the invaders coming down into the dungeon. However, just as Bel declared when he made his resolve to help the Xenos, he would obey the laws of the dungeon and kill the monster he now faced, embracing the role of a hypocrite. I love the touch the anime brings by having a drop of water signal the beginning of the fight. It's a small detail, but an extremely satisfying one. In the novels, Bel is actually dual-wielding and fighting with both the Hestia knife and Hakugen at the same time, but the anime elects to only have him use Hakugen for the majority of the fight. Omori-sensei, the author of the light novels, later clarified on Twitter that he made the suggestion to only have Hakugen be used so that Bel switching to the Hestia knife for Argo Vesta would stand out more. The action of Bel sheathing Hakugen and then taking out the Hestia knife does give off the impression that Bel means serious business. The novel doesn't really give a play-by-play of every single action Bel and the Ma's Huge take in the fight, so the anime had a lot of freedom with how they chose to choreograph the fight. The light novel does mention specific highlights like when Bel deflects the bullet seeds with Hakugen, and the anime does a great job of presenting that scene. The status on Bel's back is glowing as a reference to his Oxslayer skill, because he's thinking about Asterius and how the monster before him is no comparison to the warrior that Bel was determined to defeat. Immediately after this, Bel starts dishing out a series of attacks at high speed with Hakugen. In the light novel, he's using both of his weapons and creating a whirlwind of black and white arcs with the Hestia knife and Hakugen, dubbed the Rabbit Rush. The anime makes up for this by having an original segment of Bel chopping up the Ma's Huge's extendable mouth mid-air. followed by fighting off the monster's vines as he runs across the walls of the arena, ending the sequence as he cuts off both of its arms. Throughout the battle, the expedition crew provides a lot of the commentary, much of which is actually exposition done by the narrator in the light novel. It's a good way to help explain what is happening and give dialogue to the characters to keep them involved in the anime format. Mikito helps provide the explanation of Bell finally being adjusted to a status, and Lily explains that a prolonged fight would not be in Bell's favor. As Bell begins to charge his firebolt and the Hestia knife, the anime showcases the act of Bell focusing his magic by first having it expand throughout the area and then concentrating it onto the divine blade. It's a very nice touch to have the Moss Huge cover its face with its arm in response, as the monster is beginning to become afraid. When you see Bell begin to use his Argonaut skill, he is charging both his firebolt and weapon at the same time, a dual charge. Normally the Hestia knife would merely conduct the flames and not stay on the knife, but Bell was using Argonaut to hold it in place in order to charge it alongside the blade. The Hestia knife is a weapon made by the goddess Hephaestus herself. It has the ability to grow alongside its user, and you can actually see the blade expand with the flames if you look closely. Bell originally crafted this technique to use against his greatest rival, so it would be more than enough for the Moss Huge. In honor of his goddess, he dubs this move Argo Vesta. The light novel switches to the Moss Huge's point of view for its demise. It was panicking because it had never seen an adventurer do what Bell was attempting. The monster was convinced that the light and flame coming from Bell's weapon was destined to destroy all and return all to ash. It tries to retreat into the water, but Welf notices in time to block off its path with his ice magic sword. Right before the monster dies, it has the thought that if it were reborn, it would never go near a white rabbit again. It's a line that's somewhat humorous and almost pitiable. It also makes it clear that the Moss Huge doesn't hold a candle to Asterius, as we know Asterius to be the reincarnation of the Minotaur Bell defeated to become level 2. Asterius actively sought out the warrior who defeated him previously, and even won their rematch, creating a rivalry. Bell's ending pose after using Argo Vesta is based on the illustration in the light novel, which looks incredible for just being in black and white. Props to the illustrator, Susuhito Yasuda. The depiction of the strike in the novels is a bit more flashy in terms of the amount of light and heat being emitted, but I personally did not have too many problems with how the anime interpreted it. It still looked great, even if it wasn't a one-for-one adaptation of the final move. Also keep in mind that Bell only charged a move for 1 minute. Mari is shown peeking under a piece of ice, thanking Bell for defeating the monster and leaves before the party can see her. Originally, she's just on the other side of the frozen stream where there's still some water, but the anime's depiction is done in a cute way that also emphasizes Mari's caution to not be seen. The party makes their way to Bell and the episode ends. All in all, this was a stellar adaptation for the climax of Volume 12 as it was packed with well-animated sequences and strongly directed character moments. I greatly enjoyed the original segments they created for the Moss Huge fight, even if they elected to not have Bell dual wield for the battle. I believe they made up for it overall, and I'm excited on what the fights in the future will look like, as this one is merely a stepping stone for what's to come. The next 2 volumes that will be adapted make up my favorite arc in the entire series. As for this week's danmemo side story, it features an original scene where Hestia updates Haruhime's status, which leads to Haruhime receiving Kokonoe. I'll provide a link in the video description for those who don't have access to the mobile game. The next episode should be a breather, as it is named after Bell's new title, which I mentioned in episode 1, where the anime initially skips the Denitus, or A Meeting of the Gods. I'm not sure why HiDive subtitled it as Rabbit's Foot with an apostrophe S. Bell clearly says Rabbito Futo, and both the game and light novels translate it as such. Rabbit Foot. Hopefully that gets cleared up. A bit of warning though, it seems episode 6 has already leaked online, so keep that in mind if you want to avoid spoilers. I'm trying to avoid seeing it myself until it officially releases next week. Anyway, As always, give the video a like if you found it informative and subscribe to the channel for more DanMachi content. Remember to follow me on my socials, and this is Lorne, your guild advisor, signing out.